Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing some upgrades on the Devinci Spartan. I got a brand new fork here from SR Suntour. They're going to again be sponsors of the channel for 2021. And they sent me their brand new Durolux 36. This is their EQ version, which has the air negative spring in it, which is different from the Durolux that's running currently on the Spartan that I ran last year. It had a coil negative spring. This has an air negative spring. It's supposed to increase small bump compliance, make it more supple over high speed chatter, and it's supposed to be less noisy. That was one thing I did notice with the Durolux. You guys have probably noticed it in the videos, just how noisy it can be riding through the trails. It was the rebound on it was fairly noisy, and that was one thing I didn't particularly love about the fork. This is supposed to be way quieter. So we're gonna go ahead and put this on the Spartan, and I'll show you guys how we're gonna do that and how easy it is for you guys to put a fork on your bike. It's really not that hard. I know the first time I did it, I was pretty intimidated by it, so I just wanna show you guys how simple it is to put a brand new fork on your bike. And while we're at it, we're gonna put some new bars on it. These are Fun MTB full-on bars in orange, 785 millimeters wide, 20 millimeter rise. Look pretty cool on the Spartan, along with a new Crossfire, Fun MTB Crossfire stem. That'll look pretty cool on the bike there. So we'll go ahead, we'll get the fork on it, put the new bar and stem on there, and we'll take a look. This fork is in their nice gray, it's their race or team issue fork. So this nice gray hopefully will look good with the Spartan being gray. It's slightly different. It's more of a matte finish, but I think it'll look pretty cool on there. So just quickly showing you guys what tools you'll need. You'll need a 4 or 5 millimeter Allen, depending on your brake mount, to remove your brake. Just a pencil to mark the length of the fork where we're gonna have to cut it. This here is useful, so focus on it, to cut the fork. It's a guide for a hacksaw. You just put that in a vise, like a bench vise, and use that to cut the fork. Super easy. Just a file to file down the cut, hacksaw with a nice sharp blade. We have this crown race removal tool. We'll have to remove the crown race off the existing fork. And just this is just a piece of PVC pipe that I used to set the crown race on the fork. First step is obviously removing the wheel. We've done that, and just gonna remove the brake caliper from the fork. And this is again where you're gonna need your 3 or 4 millimeter Allen key to do that. Just when you are removing this brake caliper, just keep an eye on if you have a bracket. Like this has a bracket going from, so I have a 203 millimeter rotor on the front tire, so I have a bracket that goes from 180 to 203. So just make sure you keep track of the orientation of that bracket. Sometimes they do say which direction is up, but just, you know, keep a note of that. So I'm just gonna take the brake line, I'll just kind of wrap it up around the handlebars, get it out of the way. Then I'm gonna loosen up the stem bolt at the top here. So you'll need a 4 or 5 millimeter for this. Mine is a 4. Most bikes I think should be a 4 as well. So you're just gonna loosen that and loosen your stem bolts. Now you wanna make sure you hold the fork here, because once I take this top stem bolt out, the full fork is gonna drop. So here's what I'm looking at here, just to give you guys a close up. There's the top stem bolt that I'm loosening, and I've loosened the top headset bolt. I'm gonna be loosening that completely off, and then the whole fork is gonna drop out, and there's of course the stem bolts on the side. Take that right out. Make sure you're holding on to the fork, like I said. And also keep track of these spacers you have above and below your fork. So just set these over here. And I'm just gonna slide the stem off the bike, and we can just kind of lie it down here. And then we'll take off the other spacers. Keep track of the order that they are in, so kind of take them off, just set them aside, and then the fork will drop out like so. So we have the old fork off the bike. there is a crown race right around here. It's very tight down on the fork. You need to remove this to put it on your other fork. I know the first time I did this, I completely missed this step, and then of course nothing worked right. So we're going to try to get that crown race removal tool around here and tap it to get that off. So that's this tool here. This is that crown race removal tool. We kind of slide it on the fork like so. You could also use a just like a screwdriver and a hammer as well, but I don't. I mean, that works, I think, but I've never actually done that. Okay, so you see, we got that. You can see the right here, these kind of edges go up around the crown race. Then we can tighten these up to get it nice and tight underneath there, and then we should be able to tap it off. So I'm just going to tighten up these here on here. So you'll see here now that the edges have bitten kind of underneath the crown race with this tool. So I'm hoping now I can tap the bottom of this and it should pop it off. So I'm hoping I can tap this now and the crown race will start to come off. It is starting to come off there. So this is working there. So if I should just keep tapping this now. Oh, it's kind of fall off here. So I'm just gonna put this back on. So I'm just putting this back on and tightening it up. I got this tool, this crown race removal tool on Amazon. It was pretty cheap. I'm sure they probably make a Park Tool version or Pedro's or something else, but this bike hand version I got off Amazon works pretty good and it's pretty cheap. There we go. So the crown race is now off the fork. So we got the crown race off the fork, and we'll put this new one on the new, or we'll put the crown race on the new fork. It's always a good idea when you're putting a new fork on your bike, clean all the parts that you take off. Also at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and clean, I'm gonna take out all the parts of the headset here and clean them up. So you're gonna have your dust seal and your tensioner there, and then your bearings in there. So I'm just gonna pop these all out. They're pretty grungy. So we're gonna go ahead and clean them. See, they're pretty gross. Clean them up. When you do take out all your stuff out of your headset, kind of keep track of the order that you take it out in. Just cleaning out the old grease out of there, out of the top of the headset and the bottom. So first thing we're gonna do is actually put the crown race on the fork, because you're gonna need that to make sure you do the proper measurements to know where to cut this. So to install the crown race on the fork, we're just gonna slide it on there. And you'll see there, let's focus where I want it to, that we need to pound this down a little bit. And that's when I use this, just a PVC pipe. It's a 1.5 inch diameter, and that'll fit right over top of the fork like so. So I've just put that on there, and I can literally just kind of pound it like so to get it onto the fork. And that's it. Super easy. Crown race is installed successfully. So now we'll just want to install the fork just to get an idea of where everything lines up and where to cut it at. I'm gonna put a little bit of grease in here, around here, just before we put the bearings back in. You wanna make sure when you're putting this all back together, you do have your bearings in there just to get the proper measurement for the fork. We can always add more later when we're doing the final. install. Look at those bearings up in there. All right, so now we're going to place the fork in here and get an idea of where we need to cut this. So we'll just bring it up in here, hold it up in place. And now I'm going to put on, let's see where so you want to put your spacers back on that you had on, or wait, dust seal first, sorry. Get the dust seal on there. Then the spacers. Then I'm just going to line up with actually the new stem that I'm putting on. Make sure you use the stem that you're actually going to be using on the bike. And add a little bit of a spacer on the top as well. Now, when you cut this fork, you don't want to cut it right in line where this is right now. If I zoom in here, yeah, you don't want to cut the fork right where this line is. Like, that's where I want the top to be. And you're going to want to cut the fork about 1 millimeter or so below this line. So I'm going to put a line on here just with a pencil. So you can see when I take that off, there's the line there. I'm going to cut it maybe like 1 millimeter or 2 below that line. So this is where I'm going to use the fork cutting tool here. And basically you put the hacksaw down in this little guide here, and that tells you where to cut it. So we're just going to put this on in the vise here. So there's our line there. So I'm going to cut a little bit below there. So if I put this in here, just tighten that up. And then we just cut this with a hacksaw. This is kind of the scariest part of installing a fork, because we're cutting this steerer tube and there's basically no going back. That's why I do leave that little bit at the top of the stem. Just if I do cut this a little bit too short, it's not a big deal because I have that little room to work with there. So yeah, basically we just put the saw in there and we just cut it. Just like so. So now we'll want to just kind of blow off the dust off of there. And also take a file at this point and we'll just kind of lightly file our cut, or you won't be able to get the dust seal back over top easily. Also at this point, I'm going to install the fender. This is the nice cool thing about Suntour forks is they do come with this fender that installs on the fork, like so. Super cool way of mounting it compared to like having to use zip ties or whatever. It's actually 4 mounting spots here, here, and then up on top of the crown here. So we'll bring this up through here and put things back in the same order that they came off in. Like so. And I cut the fork too long. So this is kind of the what I was talking about. If you see here now, you can see where this is cut. You want to make sure that this is higher than the steerer tube. So I got to cut a little bit off there again. So now we have this above the cut. So now we can go ahead and install the top bolt. I completely forgot a step here, guys. Wow. Can't believe I forgot that step. We need to put a star nut down inside of this fork or we're not going to be able to install it. We need to install a star nut like this, or star fangled nut, whatever they call it, into the fork. That goes down inside of the steerer tube Like if I show you on the other fork, so if you look on the other fork there, you can see it down inside of there. I have this star nut setting tool that I got off Amazon. So we can basically just set this there. We take this tool and set it over top of the fork, and then we can just pound that down. That was like a complete Homer Simpson moment. Go to put on the fork, go to put on the top nut, go to tighten it up, and wow, there's no star nut there to tighten it into. So yeah, so then I can just take this and hammer this down in. Like so. Star nuts installed. So now we can go ahead and put the fork actually on. So now we can actually install the steer tube or the steer bolt, and I actually have something to screw into. And when you do tighten this up, you don't need to go super duper tight. You want to just kind of go finger tight, maybe a little bit more. Do not need to go crazy on it. You don't need to line everything up perfect here either. So yeah, just like so. So there we go, it's all installed there. I'll get the new bars on here, swap everything over, and we'll check it out. So with these, I did get the, it's a 35 millimeter bar in stems. I've never run 35 millimeter before, so that'll be cool to check that out to see what it feels like on the bike. Gonna put some P&W loam levers in black. I had the orange ones on there, but the orange doesn't quite match. So I think the black will look better on here. All right, so there's the new fork on the bike. Looks pretty nice. I think it matches pretty good. It'll be nice to get it out on the trails and check out the performance of it. Gonna get the bike down on the ground, fine tune the angles of the bars and all that, and tighten them down. All right, so just gonna tighten up all the bolts here. It says max 6 millimeters or 6 Newton meters of torque. Get out the torque wrench. 6. Just a little tip with a torque wrench. Always want to make sure you store it with no pressure on the torque wrench. Put it back to 0 before you store it. Like even just popping up and down on the fork, I get no sound like I would get on the other fork. So that's a good sign right there. So hey guys, thanks for watching the video. Got the new Durolux EQ factory gray lowers installed on the Spartan. New bar and stems from Fun MTB. Bike's looking pretty good, dialed in for the upcoming season. So thanks for watching the video, guys. Hope you learned something if you've never installed a fork before on your bike. Hopefully this gave you some tips on what to do, what maybe not to do. Make sure you don't forget things like I did. But yeah, thanks for watching the video. Thanks for subscribing to the channel. If you haven't yet, click the logo in the bottom corner and hit subscribe. And until next time, keep your feet on the pedals.